Alrighty, and welcome to episode 26 of the Native Overstayer podcast. And what do you know, here we are. Found ourselves back in the lockdown mode. Happy days. Jack, how are you, cuz?
Yeah, Whittles. Yeah, good. Good to be back. I guess back in lockdown, but that's not going to stop us from still connecting with each other and reaching outside of our bubbles, even if it is virtually. So yeah, good. Well, I'll tell you what, very excited today. We've got someone on who's I consider a very good friend, a good role model as well. A bit like yourself, mate, just better looking. His name's Tony Lafotanoa. Tony, still mai, tell him, oh, welcome, Tony. How are you, Uzo?
Very good, Jack. Marlon Lover. Thank you, bro. Yeah, very well. I've always told you, bro, it's green tea and a fake tan. That's all you need. And my dad's brew cream always worked wonders. And morning, Jack. And Patrick, great to see you as well.
Good to see you, Tony. Thanks for coming on, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
So Tony, tell us a little bit about what you do and what's happening at the moment in your rather busy world.
Yeah, so I'm currently the Pacific advisor for the Electoral Commission, based here in Auckland, and it's been an awesome role. I've really enjoyed it. It's all about engagement with our community. The community in particular for me has been in that space of Pacifika, and it's basically every day I'm just getting out there and whether it's digital or face-to-face, having talanoa, and connecting with those in our community, our Pacific Island community, who are leaders across the full spectrum of faith-based churches, through to business, through to education, social services. So those that have their finger on the pulse of our Pacific community, they're the ones that I engage with, and just make sure I pass on all those key messages regarding the Electoral Commission, its role in the upcoming election, 2020, and so it's more like a vocation actually. I really enjoy it.
Tony, what's the new date now that we have the election?
Yeah, so it's the 17th of October. So the 17th of October is the new date for the general election, and that date was obviously announced by the Prime Minister a few days ago, and it's in response, obviously, to the COVID levels having moved up. But we'd always planned to ensure that as the Electoral Commission, we could safely facilitate the general election in level 2. So what that means for us is we've ensured that all the safety protocols will be in place to keep everyone safe. And obviously an election has to happen. So the date that the Prime Minister set is now the date that we're all working towards, and just making sure that we create that safe environment. The second part to that too, there, Jake, is we are now going to be adding more polling booth stations. And the reason we're doing that is to mitigate the potential risk for large congregation of numbers coming to vote on the day. But we also want to stress to mitigate that crowd challenge, is that there will be more, not only more booths, but there's a early voting period as well. So we're working hard to make sure that everyone feels safe coming up to the election.
How good are we as a group of people in regards to getting out there and voting? Pacific people? Yeah,
so good question, Pat. I think the positive in relation to Pacifika is we're always very compliant as a culture in terms of when government or our elders tell us something that needs to be done, and we act on it. That's the good part. So what that means is Pacifika is, the numbers they could be better, but they're okay in relation to registering to vote. So many of our Pacific community have registered. The issue for our Pacifika is actually voting in itself. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a 2-week early voting period now as well. That'll help. But on the day, we've found that the Pacific community, it kind of falls short, and it's something that I really want to try and just encourage our Pacific leaders to, help support those that are challenged to actually get out and vote on the day. One of the things that's been a real issue is, and I mentioned a few days ago in another funnel, was that the Pacifika families operate on many of them on a split shift economy where dad's at home and mum's at work, and all vice versa, or they'll just swap an AM and a PM shift, leaving one parent with the kids at home. We know we have a lot of extended families living in those bubbles as well, but essentially what it means is that they find it too difficult to leave their place of work and or home, obviously other community church obligations, to go down to the polling booth. So we're really encouraging our Pacific community to try and forward plan and make sure that those that are eligible within their families to go out and vote would actually help support each other, so that each individual or couple can actually get down there to the nearest polling booth and vote on the day.
I guess, Tony, if people can't get to vote in person, what are some of the other options that they have?
Yeah, so obviously in this COVID environment, there'll be those that regardless of the message that we give, and it's an individual choice. That some feel that it's just too risky for them, and we all know that particularly with our elderly, they will really struggle with venturing out, let alone going to a place where potentially there's a lot of people. So we've headed that the solution off at the pass there by ensuring that there is a number, an 0800 number they can call through the Electoral Commission, and we'll guide them through the process of how they can vote without having to be physically present. So it's a really encouraging it's part of that solution for us to ensure that we make, especially for our elderly, because they're the ones during the COVID that, as we all heard both nationally and internationally, the biggest group that is suffering from this virus. So we want to make sure that they feel safe. So yeah, there is a number that they can ring, and we'll help support them to make sure that we get their vote processed in a timely manner. Leading up to and on election day.
It is pretty important for us to have our say, right? I mean, we originate from the Pacific. I mean, my mum came to New Zealand in the 70s and wanted to obviously come here for many reasons, but one of those reasons was to give me a better future maybe than I would have had in the islands, So we're part of this country now. I think we make up quite a large percentage of the population, especially in Auckland. So it is important for us to get out there and vote, not only for ourselves, but because of our history of our people sacrificing what they had to come here and give us these opportunities. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, absolutely, Patrick. And isn't it such an honour and privilege that we live firstly in a democratic society, secondly, as very proud Pacifika people, that we are able to integrate so well down through the generations and take the same opportunities that are afforded to anyone that lives in New Zealand. I often share a story, and not too dissimilar to yourself there, Patrick, and no doubt Jack, that our parents and grandparents who came here in that first wave, they were driven by those two critical factors of economic and educational opportunity. And that was always drummed into many of us as we were growing up, and that they did all the work to ensure that we were given those opportunities. But the one thing I've often challenged our Pacific leaders and community to recognise also is that to complete that full loop of total integration and empowerment for Pacific community and people is to exercise your democratic right to register and vote, not only for whoever or whichever party you want to support, but also with these referendums that have come up as well. Because either side of the aisle or either side of the question that's put out there in the referendum, those are the things that Pacifika needs to ensure that it has a very loud voice, and so that it lets New Zealand know that it is not only a valuable part of the the beautiful diaspora and fabric of Aotearoa New Zealand, but at the same time, it recognises that some of these issues will have a direct impact, whichever way you want to look at it, on our community. And so that's why I think there, Patrick, when you talk about our parents laying that platform for us, I firmly agree with what you're saying, and I think that that's something that needs to really be drummed into our generation and our next generation that we're bringing into this world and community. That being part of politics is not just the realm of our parents and grandparents; it's in our realm. And anyone that is 18 and over, you are eligible. And the second challenge, I suppose, for those who are just turning 18, because the election's been moved, it's now added another 5,000 voters, because there are 17-year-olds who have now will have turned 18 within that window that's been shifted by the Prime Minister. So they're now eligible. So we want to make sure that the Pacifika percentage of that 5,000 students, young adults that are now eligible, are cognizant of the political process, the parties, their policies, and then they also register to vote.
Tony, can you remind us about those referendums, the cannabis end of life that's coming up?
Yeah, so the referendums will be added to the election process on the day, and basically you'll have the end-of-life choice, the euthanasia end-of-life choice, and the cannabis reform for recreational use. So those two, again, are what people will be asked. Well, they don't have to answer if they don't want to, but it's those are two questions that are asked to every eligible voter in this 2020 election, and it will be attached to the voting material they receive on the day. It's look again from the Electoral Commission. Our job is just to make sure that everyone's aware that those referendum are in there. I think from a Pacifika community perspective, of which I'm in that space as the advisor, my advice is not either or in relation to that question. My advice is for our people to have a discussion, have that talanoa, have that whanau, talk in your families, talk in your groups, in your communities about either side of that question, and what is its relevancy or impact to our Pacific community. As you would have seen across the media platforms, many lobby groups and interest groups are for and against, and that's for them. That's their space. But just coming back to us and our Pacific community there, Jack, I think the referendum, it provides a unique opportunity for our Pacific community again to exercise its voice and have its say on the day.
Very important part of being a citizen of New Zealand, I think. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this role, Tony. I mean, is there anything else you want to cover off in particular with the referendum and with the election coming up? Is there anything else you wanted to cover off there, or before we move on to a bit of background on your story?
Yeah, look, I probably just, now that we've got a bit of breathing space, there is still a deadline. There was another important date called Writ Day. That's the day in which Parliament officially dissolves, and you probably saw that in the media last week, where the Prime Minister, prior to making the announcement of the lockdown levels moving back up, was supposed to have dissolved Parliament, and that's when the Electoral Commission, for all intents and purposes, is taking care of the electoral process once that's done. So now that's been shifted, it means that there is an extension of about 3.5 weeks, and which gives people more time to register to vote. So I suppose my message just to that, Patrick, is please get out there and make sure that you are on the roll, and you'll receive a card, a card that identifies you and validates your vote on election day. So yeah, that would be my key message regarding that.
And to enrol, if you're not already, you go to the website.
Yeah, please do. Go to our Electoral Commission website or vote.nz. And just follow the prompts. You'll see that there's a number of avenues in which you can get information. And that's anything and everything. And look, if people are still not clear at all about which party has what policy, or even for themselves, which political leaning they might have, there's some brilliant websites out there that also help to frame an individual who's just not sure exactly what side of the spectrum, either or, they sit on. So yeah, it's worth having a look at, because it just helps the voter stay informed. And obviously you'll be voting for the local representative and the party. They may not be the same for an individual voter for whatever reason. That's their choice. But yeah, look, just making sure that your details are correct, making sure that you are registered. It's, again, it's just to conclude on that particular issue there, Patrick, just really want people to, particularly our Pacific community, to recognise how critically important. This is probably one of the most important elections in New Zealand history for so many reasons. So this is the right time for Pacifika to, flex its muscle and raise its voice and make sure it's sitting at that table of influence around policy and decisions that are being made for our future right now, and for the future of New Zealand going forward.
Definitely. There's some powerful stuff there, Tony. And like I said before, how did you get into this role, mate? I mean, you're a man of many hats, from my understanding, that you put on and cover that lovely flock of hair that you put on your head. So just tell us how you came into this position. It's a very important position, and you're doing some important stuff. Yeah.
Oh, look, firstly, Patrick, it's an absolute honour and privilege to be in this role, because I'm always guided like yourselves, with a sense of duty and a sense of being part of something bigger than myself. Coming into this role, it wasn't too dissimilar. I was previously in another role to do with the Ministry of Health, and it was a program still running, by the way. It's called Healthy Families. And in that role, I was charged with overseeing wellness in the workplace. And again, that critical role was going into businesses and enterprise and organisations, and also not-for-profits as well, and helping them to frame or reframe their culture within their organisation, and just see how they could do things better. And, and isn't it amazing how, if you've had a background in sport at whatever level, that many of those critical skills and life learnings, they're so easily transferable into this space. So if you're you cut your teeth in that cauldron of sport, with pressure, with having to communicate, having to streamline, having to create systems and protocols to make things work, to make a team of people work. Well, that to me has been invaluable, and it's steered me very, very well. And yeah, in this role, and as I mentioned, in that other role with Ministry of Health.
You're so right. I mean, there are so many lessons that are transposable into everyday life with playing a sport. I've said that numerous times, and also some of the people that were spoken to on this podcast have said the same thing, and they've reached the top levels of sport and are still using those learnings today, whether it's in business or in life. So sport's an essential part of our community, isn't it? It's hopefully it's not being neglected, but I think it's a huge part for us to become, especially males, to release the stress, to release the energy, to learn things, the team playing, the goal setting, the hard work that's put in before, the happiness and the feeling you get of achieving those goals, winning the game. I think it's hugely important. Yeah,
totally agree, Patrick. I mean, in fact, later on today, I'm part of the Director of Rugby Forum, with all the other clubs in Auckland, when we were just discussing with the union what the remaining rounds of games need to look like or can look like in the level 3, level 2 environment. So, there's a lot of pressure, but the great thing is there's some amazing people, amazing club people that are deeply passionate, and they've got the finger on the pulse of their respective clubs in Auckland, and just we just know we're all driven by the fact that sport, let alone in our space, which is rugby and league and netball and soccer, it's not just about the sport itself. It's about the sense of community for our youth. It's about wellness that our young people get from being part of a team or even individual sport for that matter. But essentially, that's why we know that if we just keep working together to try and create these opportunities to keep these competitions going, it has a far bigger benefit than just the sport itself. It's about helping our community, because as we all know, if these young adults are not kept busy, kept motivated, inspired, trained hard and driven, the other side of the coin is idle hands. And we all know what happens when our youth just get a bit rudderless, I suppose. And it's, I think it's a fair comment to make, just because I've seen it over so many years where individuals have credited sport and rugby as a platform and a vehicle and environment that has helped steer them away from a life that would have led to a lot more regret. Not to say that it's the only solution, but definitely in this environment with COVID level 3, restricting everyone's movement, we hear it on radio and TV all the time now, that mental health and wellness has become probably one of the most important things that people are focusing on, and rightly so. My rule of thumb, and I firmly believe this, is when you finish contact sport as a young man, you have to replace it with something that still gives you that serotonin, endorphin, and dopamine kick. Because if you don't, then you'll end up replacing it with things that, I've got too many friends now that are, suffering choice-related lifestyle illnesses, rather than more so than post-contact collision illnesses. And it's a real tragedy out there. My heart is for anyone that who's had an awesome run playing contact sport at their best, recognises that if that's what made you get out in the morning and go for those runs, or hold back on eating or drinking something, find something that gives you that same sense, because it really is chemically driven. And I would say regarding conditioning, I'm sure Jack's got some great opinions on that as well. I was sharing this with a good friend of mine the other day, and he was a very, very high profile footballer back in the day, and I was just sharing with him that interval training, recognizing that putting your heart under good, healthy stress and challenging it to not go back down to rest level, but give yourself like a 20-minute interval blast is as good as anything else, because your heart's a muscle, just like your bicep. And if you train the heart like that and make it strong, then it helps with circulation. It absolutely helps with the energy levels, your flexibility, and also then, as I mentioned earlier, your serotonin, your endorphins, all your feel good, feel well, vibrant energy hormones that are already sitting there, needing to be released. A healthy heart, that's your best insurance, and that's my personal go-to, and I really encourage anyone to have a look, explore that, and you can check it all out online as well.
Awesome, Tony. So it's been really great having you on, bro. It's always a privilege to hear you and hear your wise words and see what you're doing at the moment, especially with the Electoral Commission. And I guess just for us, I guess we have to get you back on, right?
Yeah, well, the older you get, the more stories you have. They're not necessarily all true. They're probably more taller than anything else.
What I was thinking was, Tony, that once I got to my level, my top podcast guest, which was Sir Michael, I I sort of didn't want to do any more, mate. But I think it'd be injustice. I think it would be a bit of an injustice to myself and Jack that we stop doing it, especially talking to people like yourself, mate, that are out there in our communities and doing things that you know that make us all proud. And you know, just listening and talking to you and your knowledge, we can't stop this. We need to keep it going. We need to get the conversations out there. I mean, just meeting you has inspired me to make sure that my whānau and my extended whānau are going to vote. You know, they need to do it. They need to have a voice. We're definitely cemented as an important part of New Zealand now. Let's get out there and vote. Let's do it. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, look, again, thanks so much, Patrick and Jack. I think you guys have got a fantastic platform. It's something that's sorely needed. So all power to you both, and really pray that you know, where your platform goes, it extends beyond New Zealand into the Pacific and Australia, where our people are. You know, it's because it's really important, and the changing face of, I suppose, where the talanoa is happening across the media spectrum. You know, demands that there are more like yourselves who are pioneers, really, in podcasting space. And make no mistake, it's you know, the reach is significant. And like for me, just being a messenger among many, it provides a fantastic platform just to get a message to those in our community that, you know, may not listen to mainstream, but are on platforms such as yourselves. So, yeah, whakataitele, it's been a pleasure, and happy to come back and talk more tall stories sometime, and hopefully it's face to face. If we drop down into the appropriate levels, yeah, it'd be awesome. Always got time for Mount Albert Old Boy, and also for my brother Jack. He's you know, just yeah, that's the one. Just look, I just want to acknowledge my brother Jack, and really, I've always been inspired by him, because when I first met him, you know, Jack was a completely different person physically, and there's only a few people I've met in my life who I've actually seen take on a challenge that was really about you know, just getting a better quality of life. And I know, I'm sure Jack's probably shared his life story, but I saw it firsthand. And when I first met Jack, you know, he was up there he was a big man. He's always been a big man, but probably not in a healthy way for rugby when I first met him. But the way he got himself to be rugby fit, and then to go on and play, you know, at the highest level overseas. That's a fantastic story, and Jack, just want to acknowledge you, my bro. And you know, I'm inspired by you as well, mate. So thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
That's a beautiful thing. Thank you very much for acknowledging my cousin. He deserves the accolades, mate. I love him and respect him and admire him as well. He's an inspiration to me as well. So, well, that's it. We're going to close it off. Get out there and go and vote. Make sure you have your say. Very important. But as I always sign off, all love, no hate. Whalaia.
Pacifika.